Hello everybody, it's your podcast over here. It's a new year, time for a new set of videos, and for this one, I will be redrawing a piece from a long time ago, and it's this one right here. Kind of. Technically, the original was actually this one, which is a poorly traditional drawing of, I think I just made it out of boredom one day, and I was just like, I wanted to do like a cool black and white thing, and so I made this. I remade it a couple of months later due to it looking in the state that it is, and it has now become one of the drawings I draw every year to see my progress. This is something artists will do, and it's always fun, and it's also a little encouraging to see how far you've come during your art journey. And I have a couple of these, and I'll probably make a video with the other one that I'll do. But I actually did make a video about redrawing this picture back in 2021. If you don't remember, it's this one, but forgot to make a follow-up video in 2022. I actually managed to forget a lot of videos to do in that year, but hopefully that won't happen this time. But this is what the 2022 version looked like. So now let's get into the 2023 version. I decided to record all of my progress for this one, and this one took me a while. I first started with some thumbnail doodles to see how I would want the composition to look like, and for the sketch, I decided to make the pose and composition of the character slightly different from past versions, mainly because her story has slightly changed. This character I'm drawing here is named Mizumi, and I'm afraid to admit that it took me a long time to come up with that name. It was actually the name of one of my other characters, that I took it and then gave it to her for reasons. At first, she was going to be just a character that was possessed by a demon, your stereotypical edgy type character. We all love that. And then she was going to be a character that was a major villain in her past life, that got the powers of a demon and is now a good guy. But now I'm thinking of sticking with a slightly different story for her, and I'm still playing around with it. But to quickly summarize the plot I have in mind, I made a world for my characters that I can't fit into my main project, and this world, some people are granted miracles, which are said to be gifts from their god, and they give special abilities. These miracles are actually beings, though, and they can come in many forms before they fuse with their person. So for this character, she is actually a miracle herself that used to be fused with a very villainous character. But when that person died, the miracle didn't die like they were supposed to. And so, that they could survive, they fused with the body of a dead Akuma child. This is a little reference sheet of what Akumas look like, if you're curious. Or not. It's not the miraculous version. I know they're also called Akumas. I didn't know that when I named these guys. I'm sorry. Because she was unconscious, though, the miracle is in full control and feels terrible about their actions, but is now trying to undo all the damages their previous owner caused. That's why this drawing has a bit of a different composition. So instead of Mizumi looking at her eye like she's being controlled, she's instead yelling, kind of, probably either because of something she did or after she possessed her new host. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, that's enough of this story and the reasoning for the composition. The artwork itself was a bit challenging at the start. I don't know why, but the sketch took forever. It might have been because I didn't have a super clear idea of the pose yet, but it did take longer than I would like to admit. As you can just see, her design is a bit different from other iterations, and that's because I made an actual design for her. So instead of the solid black and white, I added in more grays and pops of red. I also attempted to redesign her last year as well, but I decided to go ahead and redo that again for this year. So yeah, I did keep a lot of the base elements though, specifically her Todoroki style split hair with the black and white. This was something I actually attempted to do in my first ever drawing of her, but I think I was too scared to do it, although I'm not sure why, so I just gave her streaks on the one side. But when I did the digital drawing of her, I went in full with the half hair style. And the XI, of course, I've always given her. I would imagine that her Akuma form always had the black eye on that one side. In the species, As you saw from the sheet, a lot of them are born with marks on their body or with horns or claws. They're basically, if my cat Marty was a species where they're all black and white, but some aren't born with any markings, but some others are also born with one or two eyes that are completely black. And for Mizumi, or the Kuma Mizumi possessed, she was born with one black eye. So yeah, but I thought that would be a good way to make it so that that eye isn't like super out of a left field or only showed up once she was possessed, and it was like it was always there. It was just a good way for the X to show up, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, after I was done with the line art and base coloring, I decided it would be better for me to work on the background first. Last year was the first time I decided to actually add a background to this image that wasn't a gradient, but you can tell it was thrown in at the last minute since there isn't any shading on it. So this time, I decided to go with a forest theme instead of the sort of dome room, but I still wanted to keep the same rounded, almost fish eye effect because I thought that was fun. I decided to add some more shading to this one since I thought it would be a good way to show how much I had actually learned about drawing backgrounds during last year. I learned a lot about landscapes and stuff last year, and it was a bit hard to shade the trees since they were a darker color, but I figured it would be okay since it was going to be slightly blurred out later. So yeah, after I got the bases of the background done, I moved on to rendering Mizumi, keeping in mind that the light source would be coming from her hand. My shading style between this year and last year's hasn't changed that much overall, but I do tend to lean towards more darker shadows and glowing lights. And I actually remembered to paint in things like blush. For Mizumi, the blush is all gray, but it still counts. Other than that, some other differences in the shading are probably due to me changing programs and using slightly different brushes. If you didn't know, earlier last year actually, I switched my artwork or my illustration process from Medibang Paint over to Clip Studio Paint, and I've been really enjoying it. I'm really happy with my shading style right now, and I don't really want to develop it more since there's a lot of other things in my art I could focus on instead, and I feel like I was just really focusing on that for the last couple of years, but now I'm gonna step back and focus on some other things like limbs and anatomy, mainly anatomy. For the eye, at first I was going to make the iris really small. I like to do this to make more shocked or angered expressions look more exaggerated, and I tend to do this a lot in my comics. However, I wanted to see if there is anything different in the way I drew eyes or shaded eyes, so I made it a little bigger. But nothing much has changed with my shading style for eyes. But okay, that's fine. I do shade the whites of the eyes a little differently and the eyebrows, but yeah, not much of a difference. I also forgot to mention that I've been trying to draw more detailed hair. That is something I've been wanting to improve for a while. I actually made a whole artwork where the main focus was the hair. I'll pop it up here real quick. I'm gonna make a speed paint about it, maybe, I don't know. After the shading, I moved on to the foreground. I included the horns and the X as part of the foreground, so that way I can make them pop a little more. Some of the things I included in the foreground were the lightning effect and some glow to the hand. if you're curious of how I draw lightning, I just use a round brush and just like make diagonal lines, like real sharp diagonal lines. That's really all I do to create lightning. Is it the best way to create a lightning? I don't know, but it's the quickest way, or kind of the easiest way for me to draw lightning. And this character, as well as another character of mine, has a whole lightning theme. So yeah, I'm glad that I found a way to draw lightning. And I also decided to add some particles, and previously I always did them by hand. I'll show them here, but they're really hard to tell because I drew them by hand. I always try to make them look really small, and they're small, but they're so small that you can't see them. This time I just used a default brush. I used the droplet brush in Clip Studio Paint, and I think that definitely worked much better. I think you can see them a lot better, and by blurring them out, it creates a similar effect. One of the biggest differences between this one and last year is the foreground. I've started adding more to the foreground, and although I can go a bit too crazy with it sometimes, I do like the effect it creates. So it was fun seeing that. I also added some smoke effects to the background and the foreground, since I imagine this seemed to happen after a fire, perhaps. I think I've always imagined that. I think I've always imagined maybe the particles being from embers, but this time it makes a little more sense. After I completed the background, I duplicated it and blurred it like I normally do, but I decided to do something I haven't done before and use motion blur. I've seen people use this before, mainly to convey motion, and I wanted to try it out. I think it looks pretty cool, so I might start using this more to convey motion. I think it adds a lot more to the overall expression of the character and how it overall turned out. And yeah, that's pretty much all I did. After I added a bit more to the foreground, I had completed this drawing. I think this drawing turned out pretty cool, and I wasn't expecting as much of a difference between this artworks and last year's. But yeah, it was pretty fun to look at all the drawings, and it's cool to see the evolution of my art style and this character. Doing this challenge is always fun, and if you wanted to try it out, I would suggest to go for it. Find an old artwork you have and try to redraw it in your current style. I think that'd be fun. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and hopefully I'll do this challenge again next year and remember to make a video about it. This picture, as well as my other artworks, are on my socials linked below. I have my 2 comics on my Webtoon, so be sure to check those out, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!